Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Rebecca Munro and this is Scotland at 7. And tonight I am joined with Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you this evening?
I'm grand, and nice to be on the show for the first time with you.
Yeah, it's very nice to be on with you as well. Well, we'll start with the coronavirus update and then we'll move on to our top stories. So, as of 2 pm today, a total of 2,604,206 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 2,231,063 have been confirmed negative. 373,143 have tested positive. There are 3,367 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 7 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 8,058. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 317 were in hospital last night, 33 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 am this morning, 4,068,806 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 3,512,673 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 131,373 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 113 since yesterday. And this number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. We move on to our first story, which is Afghanistan. Flag-waving protesters took to the streets of more Afghan cities today as popular opposition to the Taliban spread, and a witness said several people were killed when the militants fired on a crowd in Azzadabad in the east. Our flag, our identity, a crowd of men and women waving black, red and green national flags shouted in the capital, Kabul, a video clip posted on social media showed. On the day Afghanistan celebrates independence from British control in 1919. One woman walked with an Afghan flag wrapped around her shoulders, and those marching chanted, "God is greatest." At some protests elsewhere, media had reported people tearing down the white flag of the Taliban. Some demonstrations are small, but combined with ongoing scramble by thousands of people to get to Kabul airport and flee the country, they underline the challenge the Taliban face to govern the country. In Azzadabad, capital of the eastern province in Kunar, several people were killed during a rally, but it was not clear if the casualties resulted from Taliban firing or from a stampede that it triggered, witness Mohammed Salim said. Speaking last night, President Biden said US troops may stay in Afghanistan past the August 31st deadline to evacuate Americans. The Pentagon have warned the US military does not currently have the ability to reach people beyond Kabul airport. "If there's American citizens left, we're going to stay until we get them all out," Biden told ABC News in an interview conducted on a day many US politicians pressed him to extend the deadline that he had set. So, Chris, the Taliban want a stable transition to avoid clashing with the Afghan army and warlords in cities. Unless violence is good for the Taliban's PR, but already stray bullets and stampedes have begun to cause fatalities. Do you see this getting better or worsening?
Oh, without a doubt, it'll get worse before it gets better, and it's not going to get any better for Afghan nationals. The Taliban's previous track record shows that, and politicians, I've been absolutely scunnered with politicians, American and British, all coming out with the usual sound bites of, the necessity to step up to the plate, and we need to pull out all the stops and all these accolades, which mean absolutely nothing to the poor people of Afghanistan, who have witnessed the rule of Taliban, firsthand. So they are best placed to tell you. And when you see crowds of people running down the street towards Kabul airport, and actually physically getting on, like climbing on top of an aircraft, which is capable of doing 350 miles an hour cruise speed, If they think that clinging onto an aircraft is safer than being on the ground in Afghanistan, that tells you what being on the ground in Afghanistan is going to be like.
Mm. There are also so many unanswered questions. I mean, American intelligence warned it would take 90 days until the fall of Kabul, but it took 90 hours. So, I mean, why the timing disparity? Was there some underestimating, do you think? Or was it perhaps that American weapons and vehicles falling into the Taliban's hands?
Well, whether it's Biden or whether it was Trump or whether it was George W. Bush or Carter or Reagan, previous to taking office, they have no experience of the actual sort of like time and motion. And I mean, some insurgencies could be as quick as 90 hours. Some insurgencies could take as long as 90 days. I think it's foolish and reckless to put a time scale onto something that you're not in control of. Because the Taliban will move at their own speed, and if it suits their narrative to, do it quickly in 90 hours, or take their time and do it in 90 days, that's exactly what they'll do. So, I think it was, as I say, foolish to put a time scale on it,
Mm.
and I think it's also very, very foolish in the first instance to actually pull out of a conflict that has not seen any sustainable resolvement. I mean, if you look elsewhere and conflicts in the world and stuff like that, I mean, 10 years is a short space of time. I mean, okay, to stop hand to hand fighting is one thing, but in order to keep the peace, then you have to have a certain amount of peacekeeping force in place. You don't just say, right, okay, uh, we can no longer sustain this, and we're pulling everybody out. Because that then just lays bare to I mean, if you can imagine, just say for argument's sake, hypothetical, the SNP just go like that. Look, we're fed up of running Scotland. We're just going to move out of Holyrood. Who's going to move in? It's going to be the Tories. It's going to be Labour. Somebody's going to move in. So you just can't do it. And for there to be no peacekeeping faction in place
Mm.
during any transition is just, I think it's a real schoolboy error.
Mm. And I mean, the Taliban, way back in 2001, they said that the Americans have watches, the Taliban have time. And I mean, they've hid in the hills and cities for 20 years, and they've struck Kabul when the Americans withdrew, and the Afghan army had no real will to fight them because they were perhaps maybe a bit unorganised, or they were involved with warlords, opium corruption. There was lots of other things going on for them. So, I mean, have the Taliban out-strategized the so-called great Western powers?
I think they have to a certain degree, but by the same token, the Western powers have taken their foot off the gas. Whether it's due to the current economic question, which has been exacerbated by COVID, obviously, but the downturn in GDP in America and also Britain, has caused a radical rethink in the military operations of any country. I mean, I put a tweet out earlier on in the week that the greatest thing about war is the fact that it feeds capitalism,
Mm.
and when capitalism can no longer sustain war, then obviously it's got to stop, and they've got to concentrate on something else. They've got to build up their wealth again so that they can, speculate to accumulate, with the sale of arms, the sale of munitions, the sale of transport, the sale of logistics and supply chains, and all the rest of it. And right now, America is obviously feeling the bite, and that's why they've decided to pull out, because they have spent billions of dollars over the last 10 years. Very same with Britain. They can't sustain it, and that's why they've pulled out. But the downside of this, the other side of the coin, is that when you wage war, you naturally create migrants and refugees. Here we go. So what happens then is the refugees that have been displaced by war are now nobody's ownership. So somebody has to take ownership. But neither Britain nor America, well, America's not got a very good track record in welcoming in refugees either. You just take it a look at Mexico as a case in point, and the Latin American countries as well. So refugees are created. So therefore, somebody has got to look after them. And if the country can't afford war, it can, barely afford to look after refugees. So therefore, obviously, the hostile environment is going to be ramped up tenfold. Which will obviously suit Priti Patel. But if you didn't bomb the Donald Duck out of that country in the first place, you wouldn't create migrants.
Yeah. And now here as well in the House of Commons yesterday, Ian Blackford accused Dominic Raab of having no dignity whatsoever and lying on a sunbed instead of phoning his counterpart in Afghanistan and arranging emergency passage for British and Afghan citizens. So are you as incensed as Ian Blackford is about Dominic Raab's alleged dereliction of duty?
I'm not incensed because I try not to get incensed about people like Dominic Raab because they are not what I would term qualified politicians. They are part of a corrupt cabal who have been cobbled together, to maximise the amount of money that they can, take out of the country, and 2 years from now, 5 years from now, they'll be lying on the beach earning 20%, not giving two shinies about their past track record because they will always have a warm pair of slippers at some fireside. Whether it's in the leafy suburbs of Berkshire or if it's in a sprawling mansion in the Seychelles, they won't. They won't blink an eye. If you look at the likes of Tony Blair, his involvement in the Iraq War and the vast sums of money that he still now commands for after dinner speeching is just absolutely, it's gross in the extreme. But these people will do well and they will walk away and their conscience will not be troubled. So I understand why Ian Blackford is getting upset for it, and I understand quite rightly that Ian Blackford said that Dominic Raab was just trying to get a rise out of him. But this is what the Tories do to Scotland, and it's time that Scotland needs to wake up because all they do is just ridicule us. They just look at us like even when Ian Blackford stood up to actually make his speech, there was I noticed at least a dozen Tories leaving the chamber and not having the respect to listen to I think it was I think Patricia Gibson was sitting next to Chris Law, and she had grabbed Chris Law's attention and said, "Look, watch them all walk out." And it's just absolutely atrocious. I'm one of these radical socialists that don't believe that our MPs should be in there. Do you know what I mean? Because they're not listened to anything in any petitions. Ian Blackford, saying Scotland's ready to do our bit and stuff like that. Again, that's another wee bit of political hyperbole. But Scotland has done its bit in the past. And we have welcomed migrants. But it's always at the behest of another country. It's not at our behest. I'm not saying let's pick and choose migrants, but Scotland welcomes as many as Scotland needs and as many as Scotland wants. But because someone else is controlling it, we've got no say. Do you know? So I mean, Priti Patel's saying, "Oh, we'll get 1,000 out, sort of like in a month." Aye, but what about the 29,000? What are they to do? Just sit about, scratching their backsides playing cards? You can't do that when there's bullets flying across your head. So if Scotland is ready to take migrants, Westminster should listen and say, right, okay, Scotland's ready to take migrants. What working with councils, what is the number that you can do? So that's why Ian had said magnanimously, we're ready to go into a four-nation approach to tackle this issue. But he didn't get a ready answer from Boris Johnson. But I mean, Boris Johnson, he can't answer on the cuff because everything's all written down for him. It's done by someone else. So I personally think that MPs down in Westminster. I know it's a different subject, but to me, it's just a waste of time.
That's very fair. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that the Russian security officer questions US commitment to Ukraine after Afghan exit. One of the most senior Russian security officials today questioned Washington's commitment to Ukraine in light of its rushed exit from Afghanistan, forecasting that it would be one day abandon its Ukrainian allies in a similarly abrupt fashion. The remarks by Nikolai Patrushev, Secretary of Russia's Security Council, are likely to fan fears among some Western politicians that nation-state adversaries like Russia and China will be emboldened by what they see as the West's spectacular defeat in Afghanistan to test its resolve elsewhere. British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said today that post-Afghanistan Western resolve was now perceived as weak by major adversaries. US involvement in Ukraine, which comprises arms supplies and training, is not comparable in financial, military or political terms to its 20-year presence in Afghanistan, pitted against Taliban insurgents who swept to victory this month. There is no evidence to suggest that Russia is about to launch a fresh military intervention in Ukraine, but Patrushev's comments feed into a long-running debate in the West about how and if Washington would respond if Moscow did so. Russia remains firmly focused on Ukraine after annexing its Crimea region in 2014 and backing an uprising that same year, which has left eastern Ukraine in the hands of Russian-backed separatists in a war that Kiev says has killed 14,000 people. So, Chris, do you think that Russia and China will be emboldened by the West's exit from Afghanistan? Has the fate of Afghanistan led the West's resolve to be perceived as weak, do you think?
Of course, without a shadow of a doubt. You've even got Ben Wallace, conceding, admitting the fact that the Western resolve was being, as something like could be perceived as being tested, because Russia will play its cards close to its chest, and they will know that because of, as I already alluded to before, the onslaught of COVID-19, Britain and America having to juggle with the possible refugee crisis, which is at a humanitarian scale at this moment in time. Therefore, that's going to be exacerbated. It's going to get worse. So while Britain are dealing with that and America is dealing with the fact that they're trying to recover out of the pandemic and trying to be a global force yet again, Russia can just sit by and and just tinker around the edges to suit its own its own agenda. It's only when Russia does something major that the Western world actually sit up and take notice and sort of like say, well, that's not right. They shouldn't be doing this, that, and the next thing. But because various countries are dealing with, everybody's juggling balls at the moment, and this is one other thing that is on the radar, but it's not high on the agenda of the British administration, and certainly not high on the agenda on the American administration either.
And the US military obviously still has involvement in Ukraine, is supplying weapons and training. I mean, if you were living in Ukraine, would you be sleeping easy at night knowing that Americans might save you from a Russian assault, or would you trust them to do so now?
Well, no, I really wouldn't. Years ago, you used to be able to put a lot of stock in, knowing that the U.S. Marines were out there and all the rest. I remember my father served in the British Army, and he served alongside the Gurkhas. Again, this is another off the cuff comment, but he said that you got a better sleep when the Gurkhas were on guard duty than what you did the British. That's just down to the nature of the Gurkhas, it's a really difficult thing to. I mentioned a peacekeeping force earlier on with regards to Afghanistan. Again, if you go in the first instance, that you have to have a backup plan. You have to have a counter plan for when you actually, decide to withdraw and all the rest of it. So there has to be some sort of peacekeeping, not a force, but a peacekeeping contingent. But this is not just solely down to America and Britain, by the way. I reckon that every country in the world should, form some sort of peacekeeping force that can be deployed at a minute's notice. The likes of in Afghanistan, the likes of in Ukraine, the likes of in the Balkan states and stuff like that. Anywhere that they're needed, the UN should be able to, pluck 5,000 soldiers or 5,000 personnel, shall we say, from any one given sort of like place, collect them all together and say, right, okay, that's your project for the next 3 months, 6 months, keep an eye on it. So that's the way going forward. So, I think it's wholly acceptable, the fact that, predominantly the Russians will perceive the West to be slightly at a disadvantage at this moment in time.
I mean, do you find is it strange that both the British and Americans are delighted to supply weapons abroad to increase the profits of FTSE shareholders? But, I mean, they appear to be running faster than Usain Bolt when asked to protect international colleagues from death and torture.
But then that's what I said earlier on about capitalism, because one of the greatest wage earners for capitalism is the trade in arms. They can get around it by selling the arms indirectly to Saudi Arabia, because like selling a car, if you go to a car dealership and he convinces you to buy, he convinces you to part with 36 grand in order to buy this car, and then he's got no say in who you sell it on to. So therefore, if Britain wants to sell Saudi Arabia X amount of arms and munitions, all the rest of it, Saudi Arabia have gotten there is no comeback on Saudi Arabia as to who they can sell to. They can sell to Joe Soap the Bubble Dancer as long as he comes up with the money, and that's how capitalism works. And every government needs to wage war at some point in time, because of the investment and the returns of what you actually get out of war. The minuses that you get out of war, as I mentioned earlier on, is the refugees.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that chicken producers are blaming Brexit for staff and supply shortages. The British Poultry Council has said food producers are facing serious staff shortages because of Brexit, as this week's partial closure of the Nando's chain threw the spotlight on the problems made worse by the fallout from COVID. The trade association said its members, which include Two Sisters Food Group, the country's largest supplier of supermarket chicken, said 1 in 6 jobs were unfilled as a result of EU workers leaving leaving the UK after Brexit. There have already been warnings of turkey shortages this Christmas as shortages of delivery drivers, abattoir staff and other workers drive up pay and other costs. The British Poultry Council's chief executive, Richard Griffiths, said the group had written to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, this month asking for the government to relax immigration rules, but had not yet received a response. Last week, KFC said supply chain issues were disrupting their food and packaging stocks nationwide. Supermarkets have also been struggling to fill shelves amid a serious shortage of HGV drivers. So, Chris, do you think that the pandemic has masked the Brexit problem of both a lack of European workers in rural areas and food change, and not to mention the shortage of long-haul drivers as well?
Well, yeah. Sorry if you heard me chuckling off air, but I couldn't help laugh when you mentioned Priti Patel and not replying to petitions to relax the immigration laws. Look, this is just. I hate to use the analogy, but this is Brexit coming home to roost, and it's not just KFC. We seen earlier on in the week that Nando's are closing a certain amount of outlets as well. Which I mean, I was actually talking to my neighbour next door, and she was really panicked by this because there's two Nando's in Glasgow that do halal. And she was kind of like, "Oh my God, I won't be able to get a Nando's." So, but I mean, this is again, you see these signs. I think Subway have done it quite well actually, because Subway have actually pointed to the fact that this has nothing to do with COVID. This is all to do with Brexit, and there are, no elastoplast big enough that will cover up that open wound at this moment in time. You mentioned quite rightly the HGV drivers, but when you think of the supply chain that is needed from the farmers to the abattoirs, to the food processing and packaging, then it gets into the restaurants. You've got chefs who are multinational. I've worked with some, amazing chefs from, the likes of France, obviously. I trained as a French chef. I've worked with Italians, Spanish, Polish, Indians. I cook alongside my good friend Hardeep Singh Kohli. And this is, we haven't even begun to talk about the waiting staff. Then there's the kitchen staff. The kitchen porters and all the rest of it, the bar staff. The list is exhaustive. Because if it's a hotel chain as well, you've got the room staff as well. It's honestly, it's a nightmare, and it is going to blow up in the Tories' face. Brexit. I predicted that Brexit would be the undoing of the British Union. I make no bones about that. I still think that that's the case. And they will do the work for Scotland to be an independent country, because as soon as people in Scotland see that they can't get to, and it's a sad indictment, and I don't say this lightly, but an awful lot of council estates do actually rely on their KFCs, their Burger Kings, their McDonald's and stuff like that. It is a sad indictment on Scottish society that families actually rely on these fast food chains. But unfortunately, some of these fast food chains, when they're offering kids' meals at £1.49, it's a lot cheaper to get them from there than what it is to get them from the supermarket and cook them, exactly the way that children want. So again, that's something else that needs to be addressed. But again, this is just not solely down to COVID, because whilst I was researching this item, I came across an American source, and the labour shortage combined with the ballooning demand for meat in the US from grocery stores and restaurants that have reopened after COVID is absolutely out. Supply has outstripped demand, and again, America is struggling because of the immigration laws, and Britain will do the same. It seems to me that Australia has got a fine balance, because I was looking at Australia. They've had one reported COVID death, 690 odd COVID sort of like situations, and they've shut down the whole country again. That's it. End of. Do you know? And yet, Britain and America are still trying to keep the wheels of corporation running, because at the end of the day, if the corporations are not making money, the capitalists are not happy. It's a vicious circle.
Yeah. So do you think then that Priti Patel will have to relax her draconian immigration rules to secure workers in the UK?
No, she won't. She won't do it. She'll be so bloody minded, if you pardon that expression. She'll be so bloody minded, and she will stick to her guns, because they have got to satisfy the narrative that they put out in Brexit to qualify Brexit, because the salient point that they sold the nation was the fact of those migrants in France who are coming over here to steal your jobs. That is it, and steal your benefits and all the rest of it. She will not let go of that. She's like a dog with a bone, and it will not. There will be no capitulation from her on that whatsoever. Mark my words. And this is from somebody who fled Uganda in 1972 under the regime of Idi Amin. Obviously with her parents. And she does not understand. She's not got the empathy for a fellow human being, who are suffering the exact same way. There are HGV drivers in Britain at this moment in time, Romanian, Polish, are all looking at the situation and thinking, wait a minute, they're wanting me to work more hours because of the driver shortage. I can go back to Romania and Poland and earn a decent wage there. Thank you very much. I don't need this. And an awful lot of people are just choosing to do that. And that suits Britain, of course. And it's something that they failed to address because they did not read the small print in the agreement between the EU and Britain.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to our next story, and that is that top chief executives paid more in a year than a UK worker gets in a lifetime. The annual pay of FTSE 100 chief executives fell during the pandemic, but still equates to what a key worker would earn in a lifetime, according to a report that highlights the UK's wage divide and the taxpayer support that has kept some companies afloat. The bosses of companies in the Blue Chip Share Index were paid £2.69 million on average in 2020, the High Pay Centre said, with vaccine maker AstraZeneca's chief executive Pascal Soriot taking top spot thanks to a £15.45 million deal. The average pay figure fell by 17% compared to the £3.25 million recorded in 2019, but is still 86 times the £31,000 that an ordinary British worker can expect to earn in a year. The Centre and the GMB trade union pointed to the gulf between executive rewards and ordinary wages and raised concerns that some businesses offering bumper pay deals have relied on taxpayer backing during the pandemic. Across the 9 companies that use the furlough scheme for their employees but have not yet said they'll pay it back, bosses earned an average of £2.2 million each. These companies include Ladbrokes owner Entain, British Airways owner IAG and Rolls-Royce. So, Chris, the gap between the haves and the have-nots just keeps getting wider. And in the kind of survival of the fittest mentality, do you think that the Conservative-led UK government is proud that chief executives receive 86 times more than the average worker on a £31,000 per year salary?
I hate to be cynical, but anybody watching this programme would think that this programme's been written exactly for me, because this is all about that. I mean, honestly, it's. It's another story about capitalism, and the way that capitalism, top heavy, and again, not just this country, but America is so steeped in capitalism, it's unreal. But in in Britain, the fat cats always win. And even when Labour in charge, don't get me wrong, because you know the whole equilibrium of capitalism and socialism is the fact that when when you talk about socialism, capitalism screams down anybody that mentions socialism because you know they don't want anybody else to benefit from you know I'm not even going to say hard work because it's not hard work. It's just the fact that you know money goes to money, and that's just you know the be all and end all of it. I mean, you know, I mean, I've been involved in unions nearly 35 years, and the point that you have to make is the fact that after a decade of austerity pay, which has seen wages decline up to 15% from the previous levels of 2010, and there's still more cuts to public services, but there's no cuts to people who are allegedly I've always got to put in that, you know, so that the producer doesn't have a heart attack. Is the fact that you know that they are creaming off at the top profits, and the nothing has moved on for the worker. The fat cats get all the bonuses, all the dividends, and the workers get exactly the same. You know, and this is more borne out, obviously, in a capitalist society such as you know a Tory-run Britain, where you look at the just say for argument's sake, the NHS staff in England and Wales, you know, get a derisory pay offer, whereas in Scotland the NHS staff get rewarded with a 4% pay rise. And it's not just the NHS staff as well, because you know before any Tory will jump in, you know we have worked out pay deals along with the FPU that represents the fire brigade. We've also worked out pay deals for our frontline police forces as well. Your average police man or woman, your average fireman, firewoman, your average nurse and doctor in Scotland get paid marginally between 4 and 6% better than what they get paid down in England and Wales, and that's been stepped up again by the Scottish government, who, you know, as Kate Forbes has already said, is the fact that they're going to invest into schools as well, take on more teachers. Obviously, those teachers are going to be paid, you know, with parity of esteem, and you know that is the way to go. And what when you know the Tories are frightened about that because obviously they're in a bigger society, so their bill's going to be double, and also they've got to look after Wales as well. Now, if Scotland had the powers necessary to borrow, then you know everybody could benefit in an independent republic because we could go that one step further and we could set up UBI as well, so that the people who you know are not in these sectors can also benefit from the redistribution of wealth.
Yeah. So do you think actually that this could almost strengthen the argument for measures such as universal basic income to kind of rebalance the extreme income differences?
It has to. When you lay out the facts, you know, and I would love to argue this with a Tory because the SNP Trade Union Group have done a lot of work on UBI, and I've been blown away by my comrades that have you know done this work. I'm not brainy enough. You know, there's wee brain bots and stuff like that. You know, the likes of Bill Ramsey and Gordon Henderson and all the rest of them. They're just absolutely fantastic. Simon Barrow as well. You know, they come out with all this fantastic research, and you know, and when you put it down in black and white, there is no argument. You know, a Tory cannot argue against it because it is black and white fact. The only thing that is stopping us is the fact that we don't have any borrowing powers. Now, the reason that we don't have any borrowing powers is because the Tories don't want us to do this precisely because it will show up their inadequacies down in London and England and Wales and all the rest of it, and they'll be forced to do the same. So that's why they won't give us any other. They won't devolve any more powers to us because they know that Scotland can do it. We've already shown that we've done it with the small increments of welfare benefits that we're in charge of. Scotland is starting to radically change the way that benefits are being done. And this will set us on a good footing for when we are independent. Because it'll be one less job, to do because it's already been done brilliantly previously by Jean Freeman. She done a massive amount of work on on all that, and and that work will get carried on. I believe it's 2025 that we'll get the powers over PIP, stuff like that, and that'll be a game changer. That'll be a real game changer for Scotland. It'll be a game changer for people struggling with disabilities. But again, it's doing things differently from the capitalist way of doing it. And I'm not saying that the SNP are socialists in any such way, shape, or form, but they're more left-sided than your average bear in the woods. So it's definitely the way forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that fully vaccinated adults can have the same virus levels as unvaccinated if infected with the Delta variant. Fully vaccinated adults can harbour virus levels as high as unvaccinated people if infected with the Delta variant, according to a sweeping analysis of UK data, which supports the idea that hitting the threshold for herd immunity is unlikely. There is abundant evidence that COVID vaccines in the UK continue to offer significant protection against hospitalisations and death. But this new analysis shows that although being fully vaccinated means the risk of getting infected is lower, once infected by Delta, a person can carry similar virus levels as unvaccinated people. The concept of herd or population immunity relies on a large majority of a population gaining immunity either through vaccination or previous infection, which in turn provides indirect protection from an infectious disease and those who have never been previously infected. Now, this is a bit of a blow, obviously, Chris, for those that are fully vaccinated, but it also suggests that the Conservative Party's obsession of achieving herd immunity is vanishing. What was your opinion on herd immunity?
It was a failed strategy from the word go. When I was a member of the SNP Socialist Executive, we pursued a strategy of zero COVID, which is very akin to what New Zealand and Australia are driving at. So we were looking into the ramifications of zero COVID and based on that against herd immunity, I personally believe that pursuing zero COVID would far the benefits of that far outstrips obviously herd immunity. But herd immunity suited, obviously, again, we're talking about capitalism. It suits the Tories because in the herd immunity, it's the higher end, the higher age bracket that will succumb in herd immunity. And again, this has been borne out, by that famous phrase uttered by the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, "Let the bodies pile high." When you've got someone coming out saying that, there's a reason that he's saying that is because think of all the pensions that won't need to get paid out, because your pension's not paid out when you hit the floor. In many cases, your pension is, swallowed up by the treasury, whatnot, and what have you. So, again, the looking after older people and care homes and all the rest of it. I can see why, anybody would, obviously want to pursue that. But, that is the pernicious nature of a capitalist government. It's the fact that how can we maximise the best return with minimum outlay. And the minimum outlay is obviously, well, herd immunity. We don't need to do anything about it. We just need to naturally let it take its course. And obviously, just sit back and reap in the benefits. So, I mean, I'm speaking as someone that is double vaccinated, and I had a scare during the week because I was contacted by my ex-wife. I'd been out with my daughter, and she had said that my daughter had been in contact with someone, and they had to go and get tested, whatnot, and what have you. Thankfully, the Scottish NHS, they were notified less than 8 hours after they got tested to say they were both negative. So that was a wee bit of a relief for me. Again, the recurring theme here, Rebecca, outstandingly, is capitalism.
Yeah, it seems to be. But we'll move on to a slightly more positive pandemic story now, and that is a future pandemic expert group has been established. An expert group of leading scientists and medical specialists set up to advise the Scottish Government on preparing for the threat of future pandemics met for the first time today. The Standing Committee on Pandemics are tasked with ensuring that the country is as prepared as possible for any future risks from novel pathogens. The establishment of the group was a committee of the new Scottish Government to deliver during its first 100 days in office. Health Secretary Humza Yousaf said Scotland's world-class scientific expertise has been evident throughout the pandemic, and this committee will help ensure we are as ready as we can be for any future threat. Professor Linda Bald from the University of Edinburgh chaired today's meeting in an interim capacity, while a permanent chair is sought. On the agenda for today's meeting was its future work programme and remit. Now, Chris, COVID isn't the first pandemic humanity has faced, and it certainly won't be the last. So do you think that establishing this future pandemic expert group will be beneficial in the long run?
Oh, undoubtedly. And got to congratulate my friend and colleague, Humza Yousaf, being on the front foot on this. Sorry? It's looking forward because as you say, COVID's not going to be the last pandemic that we're going to have to deal with. Maybe not in my lifetime, but possibly in yours.
Yeah, definitely. And although this is great progress, I mean, should there perhaps have already been a group like this in existence before COVID? As scientists have been warning for years that a worldwide virus or disease would be likely at some point.
Yeah. Any research group, obviously there have been research groups before, but not one solely based, to do the work that's necessary. Nobody knows what the next pandemic could be. Do you know what I mean? It could be mumps, measles, rubella. Nobody's got a clue. Nobody knew anything, about COVID-19 before it came along. But if you've got enough preparatory work done in order to, have a baseline to start from, because this pandemic crept up on us, and we had no PPE, we had no infrastructure, we had no, what if, plan A, plan B, so to have the right people, such as Professor Linda Bald. Also noticed that Dr. Gregor Smith will be involved in it as well. Hopefully Professor Leach will have some input as well. All these eminent professors and doctors, who have been at Nicola's side at the COVID briefings, if they can feed into this, working group going forward, obviously, as I say, it may not benefit me, but it certainly benefit future generations, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is changes to fire safety laws. Homeowners are being urged to install interlinked heat and smoke alarms in a nationwide media campaign launched before new fire safety laws come into effect next year. From February, all homeowners will be required to have interlinked alarms under legislation brought forward after the Grenfell Tower tragedy in 2017. These alarms significantly reduce casualties by alerting everybody in a property to a fire. Most homes will also require a carbon monoxide alarm. Private rented and new build homes must already meet these standards, but from February they will apply to every home in Scotland, regardless of age and tenure. The cost for an average 3-bedroom house, which requires 3 smoke alarms, 1 heat alarm and 1 carbon monoxide detector, is estimated to be about £220. This is based on using the type of alarms that can be installed by the homeowner without the need for an electrician. The Scottish Government is providing £500,000 to help eligible older and disabled homeowners with installation in partnership with Care and Repair Scotland. So this seems like a sensible idea, Chris, for every home in Scotland to have interlinked fire alarms for safety. However, do you think that the cost of approximately £220 for an average 3-bedroom house will be acceptable for most?
It won't be acceptable to the poorest in society. Obviously, I'm thinking about people who are struggling with unworked poverty, 0-hour contracts. And again, thank you very much for actually reading that out, because I've also got it on the screen beside me. I was just reading it there, and before I came on air, I just caught the last of, dare I say it, STV. I was looking for updates, with regards to the football that Rahman Bajwaz does around about 6:20. And I caught a tail end of this, and they actually left out what you just read there about the fact that help will be made available by the Scottish Government towards this charge of £220. They actually left that out, and they actually just left the question as who's going to be able to afford this. And that's again, that's how the right wing media work. They love to push. They love to turn, as you say, a good story, as you said at the top of this item. They managed to turn a good story into an SNP bad story. And this is something that we need to get away from. My friend Scott Donoghue does a lot of work with Scottish Hazards, and this will be welcome news to them. It's something that they've been pushing for a long time. For these alarms to get retrofitted into all housing, within Scotland. I'm lucky enough to be in a new build. I've already got 3 alarms. What have you? But I can think of so many people that will struggle. Because I mean, earlier on I was talking about people in the most deprived areas in some council states in Scotland that can readily go to KFC and stuff like that and McDonald's in order to feed their children because it's only £1.49. They can't pluck £220 out the back of the sofa. 9 times out of 10, things like this, you can't, pay it up in instalments, like £5 a week or something like that. If there was a scheme available for that, then, possibly. But again, the argument being is the fact that the lower waged people on 0-hour contracts, people who have been incapacitated due to obviously long COVID, they've not been able to return to work. They will not be able to, readily. This won't be highest on their shopping list. And the other thing as well that I have to point out, because as I say, I've got them actually fitted in my house. Some of them are actually so highly sensitive that you can't even grill a rasher of bacon, and yet they go off. I mean, honestly, I've got doors and windows open and stuff like that anytime I want to make a BLT. So they are state of the art. I mean, technology has moved on, and they are essential, especially when you put it in the context of Grenfell and now all the rest of it. They are an essentiality.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our final story of this evening, and that is that Dennis Law is diagnosed with mixed dementia. Scotland and Manchester United great Dennis Law says he has been diagnosed with mixed dementia. The Aberdeen-born striker made his breakthrough at Huddersfield, then had spells with Manchester City and Torino before heading to Old Trafford in 1962. Law scored an incredible 237 goals in 404 appearances for United, and the player nicknamed the King ended his career across town with City, while he remains Scotland's joint top scorer on 30 goals. The 81-year-old, who was appointed CBE in 2016 for his services to football and charity, has now revealed he has been diagnosed with dementia. I am at the point where I feel I want to be open about my condition, Law said in a statement. I have been diagnosed with mixed dementia, which is more than one type of dementia. In my case, this is Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. This has been an extremely difficult year for everyone, and the long periods of isolation have certainly not helped. It is an incredibly challenging and problematic disease, and I have witnessed many friends go through this. You hope it won't happen to you. You even make jokes about it whilst ignoring the early signs because you don't want it to be true. However, the time has come to tackle this head on, excuse the pun. I recognise how my brain is deteriorating and how my memory evades me when I don't want it to, and how this causes me distress in situations that are beyond my control. Law is immortalised in the United Trinity statue outside of Old Trafford alongside the late George Best and Sir Bobby Charlton, who it was confirmed in November has also been diagnosed with dementia. So Chris, I'm sure many Scottish football fans will be very saddened to hear this news, won't they?
Yeah, you know, you won't often hear this from me, but Dennis Law honestly could, you know, he is the epitome of a British icon. You know, I mean, he is. You know, I mean, he plied his trade. Although he came from Aberdeen, he plied his trade predominantly down in England, and as you rightly say, before he moved on to Torino and then came back and signed for Manchester United. Which, you know, as a passing thing, you know, it's one of my opposing teams as a die-hard cop-out, a Liverpool supporter. We don't like Manchester United very much, but you know, the likes of Dennis Law and you know, Jack Charlton and you know, Nobby Stiles and people like that, they have all succumbed to this horrible, horrible disease. You know, I mean, Scotland has lost a few. I can remember, sadly, Jimmy Johnson, one of Celtic's greatest players, suffered, you know, with it again. Billy McNeil had it as well. The captain, the Lisbon Lions, the captain of the team that first won the European trophy. First British club, if you want to put that in inverted commas, won the European trophy. And it seems to be that dementia is quite closely linked with, you know, contact sport, you know, such as heading the ball and stuff like that and all the rest of it. You know, it's really, really sad. And, you know, I heard somebody saying earlier on today that, you know, Dennis Law is a bachelor. Quite clearly, of course he is. You know, I mean, every time that you see Dennis Law, I mean, obviously he's on the television and stuff like that, but he's always ready with a quip and a smile and all the rest of it. And, you know, it's a sad, sad day for British football in general. More notably Scottish football as well. He's got his own personal wee space in Hampden and stuff like that. You know, where you know, he's looked upon with great affection. But yeah, you know, a sad story at the end of the evening.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that is all we have time for this evening, sadly. But thank you so much, Chris, for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you and hearing your thoughts.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you.
No problem. And thanks to everyone watching at home. And if you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland further, then just follow the link at the bottom of your screen just now, as the more who support us means the more programmes we can make for you. So thanks again to Chris for coming on this evening, and join Andrew Wilson tomorrow night, who will be interviewing Rosa Sally and Ika Feragotic. So thanks again for watching and have a good night.